My wife, 36, female, has always been a spontaneous and outgoing person. I'm the opposite. When we met in our 20s, there was an instant connection, and we both realized we inspired a lot of positive change in each other. She helped me come out of my shell. I helped her settle down and learn responsibility. All throughout our marriage, we balanced our differences by making compromises and communicating, etc. We loved each other very much, and we did whatever we could to keep our marriage issue-free. We have 2 kids together, a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old. Normally, we would put a little money aside every month to save up for a family vacation over the summer. I never had the opportunity to go to places like Disneyland, the Grand Canyon, or Niagara Falls growing up, so I wanted to make sure I could visit those places with my family. Last summer, I saved a significant amount of money to be able to take the entire family to Disney for a week, so we could enjoy some quality time together. However, our sons heard about this summer camp from one of the neighbors' kids who attended every year. It sounded like a lot of fun, and they practically begged my wife and me to let them go. After some convincing, we decided it would be best to let them go to the camp, and we would sacrifice the Disney money to go. The summer camp actually ended up being a little bit cheaper than what I put aside for Disney, so we had a little extra that we could spend on something else. Our dishwasher broke beyond repair a few months before the decision, so I was excited to potentially buy us a new one. However, Jen still wanted to go on vacation. I tried to convince her that the dishwasher would be the best option. She kept telling me that she needed some excitement or an escape. In the end, I helped her see the reason, and we bought a new dishwasher. The kids were both gone for a month at the camp. During the first week, it was relatively quiet at home. Jen and I didn't really even speak that much. I was slammed with work, and Jen volunteered at a lot of different places during the day. I started to notice that something was going on when she was coming back from the community center, where she volunteered way later than she normally did. I questioned her about it, but she just told me that bingo ran late because one of the older gentlemen threw a fit about someone cheating. At the time, I didn't think much of it because I trusted her, but it kept happening. One night while I was home and Jen was presumably out volunteering, I was scrolling through Facebook on my phone and saw a post from the community center, where she was supposed to be, saying they had to close early due to a burst pipe. The timestamp on the post was for the afternoon, so I knew that if Jen had gone to the community center, she would have had to come back not long after. I was instantly very suspicious about why she was still supposedly at the community center. I texted her, asking when she planned on being home. She lied to me, telling me that bingo might run late once again. She was up to something and I needed to find out what it was. I went to her computer and looked through some of her messages on Facebook and Instagram, searching for anything that might indicate who she was with, or what she was doing. I didn't see anything suspicious there. But when I opened her emails, I found something alarming. She had dozens of emails from Tinder about new matches and messages from various men. My heart dropped thinking that she was using an app like that. I downloaded the app on my phone and used her email to try and log in. We were open with our passwords, so I thought that I might have a good chance of packing into her account, and to my luck I did. I was completely shocked when I looked through the messages. She had been messaging several men, setting up dates with them, and presumably sleeping with them. The dates on the messages corresponded to the dates when she told me she was out late at the community center. In some of the messages, they were even exchanging Snapchat usernames and things like that. I took some screenshots while I was still logged into her account. Then I logged out of everything and tried to pretend like I didn't see what I did. If she was going to turn her back on our marriage so easily like that, I wasn't going to give her an out to try to explain her behavior away. By the time she got home, I was in bed pretending to be asleep so I wouldn't have to hear her lie to my face about where she was. After a shower, she climbed right into bed and pretended the same. I let my curiosity get the better of me, and while she was asleep, I snuck out of the room with her phone to view some of the Snapchats she had been sending. As I viewed it, I recorded what I was saying with my phone for my own evidence. She had been exchanging a lot of graphic pictures of herself with the men she was sleeping with, but that wasn't even the worst part. The worst of it was when I found a message where she confessed to one of the men that she was married, and she was just looking for a little excitement in her life. He thought it was hot. If she wanted excitement so bad, I would give it to her. Maybe not in the way she hoped, though. I messaged all 3 of the men she had been messing around with and sent them all my phone numbers, telling them to text me instead. My wife had no idea I'd done that, and I'd been texting them in secret for days to prepare for my confrontation. As my wife, I invited all three of them to the community center under the guise of wanting to hook up with them. Still, my wife had no clue. It was a bingo night, so I knew it would be packed there, and all of her friends who volunteered at things like that with her would be in attendance. I told my wife to dress up because I was taking her out. She was reluctant at first, but I convinced her that it would be fun. She was surprised to see I'd taken her to the community center. She was even more surprised when we walked in, and all three of the guys she'd been cheating on me with were waiting in the lobby. They didn't know each other, so they weren't talking, but when they all saw my wife, they perked up and walked over to her. The one who knew about me lingered behind, but when I made eye contact with him, he decided to walk over. There was a huge confrontation. My wife turned and yelled at me for invading her privacy. Two of the guys had no idea she was married, and told her they never would have crossed that boundary had they known. Everyone in the community center was watching the argument. My wife stormed off and went back home, expecting me to follow so we could continue fighting there. But I had already made arrangements to stay with my brother after, so I went right there. I finally feel like I'm able to talk about this now because the divorce was just finalized last week. She and I have joint custody, but our sons have wanted to spend more time with me because they're angry at her for ruining our family. Even though I am angry with her too, I try to encourage them to spend more time with her. It's been hard to trust others enough to get back into the dating scene, but I'm going to start trying soon, so wish me luck. First of all, OP, I am so sorry to hear that your wife betrayed you in such a way. However, it almost sounds like she had been waiting for an excuse to act on her desires for quite some time. With the kids gone and the needing excitement excuse, she acted very quickly. She could have spoken to you and tried to figure out a way to add some spice into your lives to avoid betraying you. But she chose the immature, selfish way of handling the situation. I'm glad the divorce is finished and you're readying yourself to move on. Hopefully you can find happiness with another person. Now let's move on to our next story. All of the emotions for this are still so raw, so this might be somewhat jumbled to read, but I recently discovered that my wife of 6 years has been cheating on me for a while with my so-called best friend. To begin with, my wife and I always had a happy marriage, so I was blindsided when I found out what had been going on. She and I had a lot in common. We did almost everything together and we enjoyed ourselves while doing it. I have known my best friend since my freshman year of college. It was a classic friendship story. He was my first-year roommate, and ever since then we have been inseparable. Honestly, before I met my wife, he was the most important person in my life. I was estranged from most of my family, and when I graduated college I had a falling out with my parents and I haven't spoken to them in years. My wife and best friend always got along. That was one of the things that I loved so much about my wife. She could get along with just about anybody without any problems. I never noticed any flirting or touching or anything like that before with them. Now I must have just been entirely oblivious leading up until how I found out, because I was completely blindsided. Sometimes I wonder if I only found out because of sheer dumb luck, or if there was perhaps some force trying to show me all along. One Saturday my wife got called into the office to help troubleshoot some problems with some staff, and she happened to forget her phone. I was in my house with my friend. We were just going to play some video games and chill until my wife got back. She ended up calling me for her work to ask me if I could look for her phone because she wasn't sure if she left it there, or if she lost it somewhere else. While I was on the phone with her, I asked my friend to call her number. He dialed it, and we both walked around the apartment listening for it to see if we could find it. I was of course the one to find it. Before I could yell for him to hang up the phone because I had it, I noticed that the number wasn't saved under his name. It was saved under a woman's name with the word work in parentheses behind it. I thought that was strange, but it wasn't necessarily damning evidence, though I was too curious as to why that was the case to ignore it. I hung up the phone yelling to my friend that I found it, and telling my wife that it was there before hanging up the phone with I opened their text messages, and saw dozens of messages between them. Some of them were romantic, telling each other that they loved each other. Some were explicitly detailing things they wanted to do to each other when they had the next chance, and they even exchanged some pictures. I didn't know what to do. The two people who I cared about most in this entire world had gone behind my back and stabbed me in it. It felt like the world was closing in around me. I've never been a confrontational person, so I didn't want to address my friend about it at the time. I ended up telling him that we should cut our video game session early so I could run the phone to my wife. When he left, I almost completely lost control of myself. I had to fight the urge to scream and break everything in my entire house. After I composed myself, I realized I needed to go through and see when it all started. Apparently it had been going on for 2 years off and on. It all started when my wife messaged him and told him that if I hadn't been in the picture, she probably would have ended up with him. I'd never felt more broken in my entire life. When I looked at the date of that message, I realized that it was almost exactly 2 years since it was sent. I realized it was almost their anniversary. An idea suddenly hit me, and I felt it would be the best way to confront them both. We were all a part of one big friend group, so I knew exposing them to our friends would be what hurt them the most. I was hurt enough at the time that revenge was all I thought about. So I planned a dinner party for what I perceived to be their anniversary. I didn't tell my wife or best friend at the time what it was about, but they were both excited about the party. When the day came, most of our friends made it to our house, bringing bottles of wine and dishes to share with everyone. We made it through dinner, but when dessert came, I had a very special cake brought out for both my wife and friend. Right in the center of the cake were the words "Happy Anniversary," then both of their names. Some of our friends awkwardly laughed and looked around each other, but some of them got what I was doing right away and looked between them with disgust. My wife and friend tried to play it off like they didn't know it was going on, but it was clear that they were trying to save face. I pulled out my phone and read a speech that I prepared for them. I recounted when I first introduced her to my friend and how much their friendship meant to me, and I recited some of the quotes from their text messages. At the end, I said that I wanted a divorce. They both left together, trying to run away from all of the questions our friends were asking them. When they were gone, there was a mixed review of how I handled the situation amongst our friends. Some of them thought that I was being immature, and I should have spoken to them one-on-one, but some of them agreed with how I acted. They said that they deserved to know that people whom they thought were their friends were liars and cheaters. We're going through the divorce proceedings right now, and it's clear that my wife and former best friend are going to try and pursue something together. However, they are completely alone. None of my friends want anything to do with them for how they betrayed me. I just hope that what they did was worth it for them in the end. Opie, I want to offer my condolences. I can't imagine how hurtful it was for your wife to betray you, especially not with your best friend. It might take you some time to accept this, but people who would do that to you were never really there for you to begin with. I'm glad that your other friends are sticking by you during all of this. It definitely sounds like you need a good, reliable group of people around you to help support you as you heal from this massive betrayal. I wish you all the best. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation, or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm going to tell you all about how my wife went from the considerate woman I knew to someone who would go behind my back for short-lived pleasure. I hate that this happened to me, but all things considered, I'm grateful it didn't turn out worse. We were both 27 and married for 4 years when things started to change. We decided to start trying to conceive a child, and she simultaneously decided to start a discreet relationship with our neighbor. Whenever we were leaving or coming to our apartment, we had to walk past his front door. We saw him in passing many times, but my wife never let her eyes stay on him too long. He was tall with dreadlocks and I guess handsome, but I don't really want to say that. She went out to the car for something one night, and the next day, she started checking her phone a lot. I think she left a note on his car with her phone number. Besides checking her phone a lot, she was really jumpy and defensive. I mentioned that we were invited to a 4th of July barbecue that some of the neighbors were hosting. She stopped what she was doing and said she assumed I wouldn't want to go. I knew she was doing this because she wanted to go, hopefully without me there. I told her I would go with her if she wanted, and she said she didn't want to be the only reason I was going. You know, the stupid, tricky way that women reel men into arguing. I put my hands up and said, if you want to go, tell me when we're leaving, and walked away. At the 4th of July barbecue, the neighbor man we'll call Noper was there. I'm quite sure she was texting him at this point and told him she'd be there. He did a really good job of playing dumb, like he picked the chair next to my wife at random. It was like they both underestimated how observant I was. I already decided at this point that our relationship was in trouble, and if I couldn't reach her before she cheated on me, all hope was lost. We all chatted outside over the music coming from someone's Bluetooth speaker. My wife paid me no attention beyond the occasional glance to make sure I was still there. She was busy gabbing her mouth about pointless stuff, mostly directing her attention to Noper, but including other neighbors so I wouldn't catch on. I tried telling her I was ready to leave, but since she didn't want to stop talking, she suggested I head back to the apartment without her. I tried staying longer, but I had to go back because I was tired. I finally gave in and went back inside. By the time I got to the window to look outside, Noper and my wife were gone. I went to his apartment and knocked on the door. He took almost a full minute to answer, and that bothered me. When he opened the door, my wife was obviously not in sight. He was dressed, but it wasn't the same outfit he had on 15 minutes ago. I knew it was a long shot because I had no proof, but I asked him if my wife was with him. He tried to look confused and said no. I asked if he was sure because she texted me that she was going to hang out with him for a while. This was a lie, but with a very perplexed expression on his face, he looked towards his bedroom for a split second. I knew she was in there. He told me again, but slower, that she was not in his apartment. I stared at him real hard for a few moments, then walked away without another word. Before my wife even returned to our apartment, I ordered a hidden security camera to install outside our front door. When she returned, she looked flushed and avoided eye contact with me. I tried asking where she was, and just like before, she got defensive and told me I was crazy. She said she walked around outside while she ate another serving of food. Then she got caught up with the neighborhood gossip spreader. I knew she was lying. I didn't believe her at all, but it wasn't because I had proof. It was because I knew my wife's personality and that she was acting guilty. Before the obsession with her phone and constantly defensive demeanor, she would always communicate with me. Even if it was just her crazy and pointless thoughts, she would share them with me. If something was upsetting her, she would tell me. It was unlikely that she suddenly stopped having thoughts or complaints worth sharing with her husband. It was much more likely that she didn't feel like including me for one reason or another, and maybe that was because she had a fling going on. I called her brother to ask what I should do. He didn't think his sister would be capable of something like this because all she ever wanted was a happy marriage without betrayal. After I told him more of the signs I noticed, he suggested I wait until the security camera catches something before making any decisions. I agreed. After this conversation, I waited weeks for my wife to make up a reason to leave the apartment. Both of us worked from home and we usually went places together. She never did leave the apartment without me. I finally decided to check what the security camera caught. It was showing Noper's front door and our own. Eventually I saw at 3 a.m. my wife leaving the apartment. I could not believe my eyes. She was moving very slowly, being careful not to make a single sound. She tipped her down to Noper's door and knocked. He answered within 10 seconds and let her in. I was furious. I sent the clip to her brother and he replied with absolute shock. My wife never knew about the camera and it was so small that she didn't see it. She didn't stop at one visit. The camera caught 3 times in 2.5 weeks. I told her brother about the additional clips, asking him what I should do. I was at a loss. Their parents had since passed and I wasn't sure how I could get her to move out of the apartment without putting up a fight. He offered to come over while I dumped her and I accepted. He showed up and she was confused. I told her I had proof of her sneaking to Noper's apartment and I would no longer consider myself married to her. Her jaw dropped. She started trembling and swore she would never do that. She was already less defensive than normal because her brother was there. I asked her if she wanted to see the video evidence and she said yes. After watching it, she was silent. She had a very angry expression, but the only person she could have been mad at was herself. We tried talking to her more, but she was only silently fuming. Eventually, she stormed into the bedroom and packed a bag. I thought she was preparing to move out, but she only grabbed enough for a few days. She walked straight past us out the door and into Noper's apartment without knocking. Her brother and I stared at each other in disbelief. He helped me move all her stuff into the hallway of our apartment complex. I was actually pretty amused picturing her attempting to bring all this stuff into Noper's apartment like it wasn't a big deal. Over the course of a week, she managed to get half of her stuff into his apartment before he told her he changed his mind and didn't want her to stay with him anymore. This is when reality really sunk in. She called her brother and asked him if she could move in. He said no. Besides the fact that he disapproved of her behavior, he wasn't permitted to let anyone move in. Then she called me. She didn't know I had enough time to update the landlord that she'd moved out. She begged me to forgive her. She said this was the worst mistake she ever made, and she would do anything to make it better. I told her I would never be able to look at her the same way. I told her I'd always worry she was sneaking over to the neighbor's house, or searching for someone to cheat with online. She cried and said more, but I had to hang up. 1 month later, she was still homeless. Most of the stuff I put in the hallway was already in the garbage. She would sleep outside on the bus or at strangers' houses. She managed to work a little bit, but not enough to afford a place to live or frequent hotel rooms. I felt bad, but she'd brought it all on herself. To help myself cope, I completely redecorated my apartment and had lots of friends over. Noper left a note on my door apologizing. He contributed to the disaster, but it was mostly my ex's choices. 1 year later, we were officially divorced and I got the opportunity to move to Hawaii. I worked from my home or the beach and started dating a really lovely woman. My ex did manage to find a place to live with a man she met on the bus. Her brother updates me and according to him, she is not happy. She's learned that beggars can't be choosers, and now she only focuses on survival. Wow, OP. I believe you made the right decisions throughout this story. You kept your cool while knocking on the door of your wife's lover. You installed a camera, contacted her brother when you weren't sure how to proceed, and updated the landlord in a timely manner. I'm relieved that she walked out under her own volition and could not return. It's such a relief you didn't conceive a child with her before all this happened. I can only hope she'll become more self-aware and consider the consequences of her actions. She knew what she was doing. Her behavior changed because of the guilt and anxiety she felt. When her worst fears were realized and she tried to get you back, you stuck with your decision and didn't give in. As difficult as it might have been, it was very wise. Thank you for sharing your story. I wish you all the best going forward. Now let's get into today's second story. I was married to my wife for 8 years when all this went down. I was 42 and she was 37. We had 3 black and white dachshunds. They were pretty much like our children. One day, when I arrived home from work, none of the dogs came to the door to greet me. That was very odd. Another thing that was very odd, my wife didn't come out to greet me either. I opened the room to our study and all 3 dogs came charging out. Why were they in our study with the door closed? Then the dogs gathered by our bedroom door barking. The hair on my head was standing up at this point. I knew something was off. I tried to open the door but it was locked. I thought I heard whispering and scuffling. I popped the lock with a toothpick from the kitchen and the dogs rushed in, sniffing around. My wife was sitting on our bed in her underwear with her laptop, but it was just starting to turn on. She looked at me like I was a ghost. The dogs then started growling at our closet door. I opened the door and found a man, standing there in nothing but sweatpants and looking terrified. I wanted to put my hands on him so badly, but I only screamed in his face, asking what he was doing with my wife. He bolted out of our house faster than lightning. He didn't even grab his shirt. I turned to my wife, the woman I spent over 9 years of my life with. She changed everything in one day. She started to frantically apologize and explain. She went to the dog park months ago while I was at work. She met another man there that had a dog. Big shocker. He flirted with her and talked for at least an hour. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring because it made her skin irritated sometimes. When he asked if she was single, she said yes. I could not believe what I was hearing. He asked her out and she said yes. They went on a few lunch dates while I was at work, which eventually gave my wife the courage to bring him here for sex. I spat in her face. It was the least she deserved after what she just told me. I asked her why she didn't go to his house. And get this, she said he lives with his mom temporarily. What a winner. I told her to get out immediately and she just cried. She pleaded with me to reconsider divorce. She said separation is fine because I needed time to heal, but she needed me in her life and we could recover from this. I told her that she wouldn't be the judge of what I needed to do because she was no longer my partner as of this day. She let out a wail and started packing up her stuff. She was moving way too slow, so I started throwing her stuff out the window. She did not like that at all and picked up the pace. After she had her stuff together, she asked me where she was supposed to go. I laughed. Why didn't she think of this before cheating on me? I got her a taxi and told him to take her to the homeless shelter downtown. She was in disbelief. I don't know why. Maybe she didn't think I had the strength to resist caring about her after her breach of trust and infidelity. She didn't have any money or family, so this was it. She had to realize how shit out of luck she really was. All because I came home from work 1 hour early. During the time she was gone, I felt really bad. I'm sure she felt worse, but it was different being in the house with the dogs. They looked at me like they wanted their mom. How excruciating. But you know, the funny thing about life is that it's always changing. All living things change too and adjust to change whether they're prepared or not. My dogs and I started to accept the new norm after just a few days. During that time, my ex begged me to come get her, but I eventually blocked her number. I needed this time apart to decide what the best course of action was. I filed for divorce after a few weeks of separation. I couldn't let her back into what was now my house. She'd let in another man, and it would never be the same to have her. During those 2 weeks, my ex told me she was staying with an old friend from high school who wanted to help her out. I then sent the divorce papers to that address, and since she was history, I was the owner of the house and dogs. There was no disputing it. So as devastating as it was to my wife, she brought it all on herself in exchange for a short fling with a dog owner that lived at his mom's house. I don't actually know where my ex is anymore. I can't believe it considering how many years we spent together, but she doesn't have the same phone number. The irony about this whole story was that several months later, I went for a walk in the dog park and met a woman. She had one chocolate dachshund. She was the most beautiful woman I ever saw, even though I don't put any value on that. After talking to her for a good while, I felt myself falling for her intelligent and kind personality. I asked her on a dinner date and she accepted. One more thing I have to add. If I would have been the one walking in the dog park as a married man, I would have tried to bring my wife with me. If for some reason she couldn't come, you bet I would have kept my eyes from wandering. Before she cheated on me, I honored and respected my wife no matter where she was. I wanted her to be my life partner and she was. No stranger in the park would have gotten to know me well enough. There's too many people in the world, but that doesn't mean I'll get a new one when I'm bored. Life is too short to break the hearts of the people who trust you the most. Wow, OP, I have so much respect for you. You know how a good relationship is meant to work. Honesty, communication, and respect are probably the most important qualities to have between a couple. Your ex knew she was going behind your back to cheat on you, and didn't care enough to stop it. She continued hiding it and sleeping with you as if nothing was wrong. Maybe nothing was wrong within your marriage, but she just simply didn't have the self-control or respect for you that was needed for the relationship to thrive. No matter what the cause, I'm sure you had a great lesson in self-control, patience, strong will, and letting go. Like you said, change is always happening. Time heals all wounds. Thank you for sharing your story, OP. I wish you the best of luck and love in the future. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Here is my story. My wife and I married 2 years after dating and she moved in with me. And a year after we married, she got pregnant and gave birth to a boy. It was one of the happiest moments of my life, because I had always longed to be a father. Even before the baby was born, I made everything he would need available. We started shopping for baby stuff after we knew the baby's gender. And I even built his nursery myself. I wanted our child to be received with love and everything to be perfect, so I didn't hold back in spending. During her pregnancy, I cared for her in every possible way. It was difficult because she had those weird cravings, and each time she needed something I got it for her, even if it was at an odd hour of the night. When the baby came, I was so happy, and I did everything possible to make life comfortable for my wife and child. To make my wife happy, I got her the latest iPhone as her push gift. I worked from morning to night to ensure I put food on the table and provided all their needs, even if it meant neglecting mine. We lived in peace and harmony until the baby was 6 months old. I noticed that my ex-wife started acting weird. There was a particular caller who never took the calls, and most times she would turn off the phone if the caller didn't stop calling. If she took the call, she'd go outside for it and spend time before she returned, which was very suspicious. The first time I asked about it, she told me it was a wrong number, but the more the caller continued calling, the more I was convinced it wasn't. Then one day all hell broke loose. I was home that weekend resting inside when someone knocked at the door, and naturally she went to get the door. Immediately she got to the door, I heard a man raise his voice, and before I could wrap my head around what was going on, she shut the door behind her. I was curious about who it was, especially since I kept calling her name, and she did not respond. When I went outside, I recognized the man that was yelling. It was her ex-husband. I recognized him from the photo she showed me. He was obviously furious and kept yelling at her to let him see his son. My first reaction was to order him off my property, but he said he wasn't leaving until he had seen his son. I was very confused because I didn't know what he was talking about. I thought my ex-wife would say something about the son he was yelling about, but she didn't. Instead, she yelled at him and called him names. She mentioned something about him being a cheat and a liar, and in anger he called her a bigger liar, and he turned to me with the "I'm shocked you didn't know" look. Without wasting time, he told me that he was the father of my ex-wife gave birth to, and she was only living with me because I took good care of her. It sounded like a lie, but it wasn't. Even as I type this, I still feel the hurt I felt that day. It turned out that her ex-husband was telling the truth. I found out that she still met with him, and they got intimate whenever they met, and the reason she stopped taking his calls was because her ex-husband wanted to be part of the baby's life, but she refused, claiming he was a bad influence on the baby. First, I didn't believe it. I wanted her to tell me he was lying, but she didn't. She started sobbing, and even physically attacked him for ruining her life. I was so devastated and I couldn't even control my tears. After everything I had done for her and the baby, I didn't think she would betray me that way. All that while, I treated her with love, made hard sacrifices, and even built the nursery myself, because I excitedly believed she was pregnant with our child. I still had doubts, so to be sure, we did a DNA test, which confirmed I was not the father of her baby, and I was very heartbroken. Without thinking twice, I kicked her and the baby out of the house. It was a very painful thing to do, especially with her innocent son crying. Funnily enough, she refused to leave that day. She kept begging for mercy, and saying that her ex-husband would not help her raise the child, and that I was still the child's father, irrespective of what happened. But I still kicked her out. I also collected the car I got for her because it was registered in my name, and I was still paying for it. We divorced because I could not just forgive her or pretend nothing happened. Although she begged and called me several times, there was nothing I could do. She used me and was cheating on me with her ex-husband. In the end, I lost her, I lost the connection I had with the baby, and everything else went down the drain. All of the money, time, resources, and sacrifices I made counted for nothing. And although I have nothing on women, I don't think I'll ever trust and fall in love again. As for my ex-wife, she ended up raising the child alone. The last time I heard, her ex-husband had 3 baby mamas, so I guess she was the 4th. I haven't fully moved on, but I know I'll get there. OP, I know you're still hurting, but you should be glad things turned out this way. If her ex-husband did not show up at your house, you would have probably raised the boy, and in the end, he'd still go back to his father. I'm glad you didn't take her back, and you didn't let her manipulate you. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Now let's move on to the next story of the day. My wife, 31 female, and I, 35 male, were married for 4 years, and I never believed we would live apart, until I discovered a shocking truth. From the first time I met my ex-wife, she had always been a yoga lover. Aside from yoga, she was always obsessed with having the perfect body, harnessing her spiritual side, and stuff I never understood. In fact, the first day I met her, she was on her way back from one of her yoga classes with her group of friends, and I liked her instantly. She had just graduated from college, and there was this spark she had that I loved about her. She was full of life, laughed a lot, and everything with her was beautiful. I was eating when she came into the restaurant with her other yoga buddies, and I was forced to pay for their meal to get her number. Something about her pulled me closer to her, and I only felt that way once in a blue moon. After I got her number, I called her immediately so she could save mine. And when I returned from work that evening, we spoke on the phone. The end of our conversation resulted in us picking a day to eat together and get to know each other, which turned out to be very successful. From our first date, I discovered that we had much in common and similar interests. Like me, my ex-wife believed there was a way to get successful at a very young age and retire at 50. She was open to trying out new ideas and buying courses that could help improve her, and she even had 2 YouTube channels to her name. Aside from my unexplainable attraction for her, My ex-wife was very intelligent. I guess it had to do with her studying business management, but she was also street smart. Even as friends, she always recommended books, seminars, and things that could help us make it early in life, and this alone was a big green flag for me. Whether it was health, personal development, career, or any wheel of life, my ex-wife always seemed to have everything under control. She was good with everything she did, and I even began to draw motivation from her. I was always looking forward to spending time with her, learning from her, and getting recent updates from her. And because I was one of the few guys who listened to her and praised her for her commitment and discipline, we got close very fast. In a matter of weeks, she knew where I lived and I knew where she lived too. Even without dating her, I had imagined what it would feel like to spend the rest of my life with her, and how much we would grow. Not to brag, but she was different. She wasn't the regular girl who only thought about buying the next shoes, hair, cloth brand, or makeup. For her, it was how to get a big break and retire for life. She didn't subscribe to the idea of working all her life and enjoying at old age, and I belonged to that school of thought. Eventually, we became good friends, and the more I spent time with her, the more I grew to like her. The good thing was we were both single, and I was open to taking a chance with her. Right from my early teens, I had always loved intelligent girls who would blow me off my feet with their super brains, and I believed my prayers were answered when I met my ex-wife, but I was wrong. We were friends for 7 months before I asked her out. I didn't want to wait any longer before someone else would take her away from me, and from the first month of our relationship, I felt we were made for each other. Months after we started dating, the level at which she influenced me grew too, and many things changed in my life. We were the perfect couple, and every day I thank God for meeting her. As of the time we met, I was earning little, but I tried my best to gift her occasionally, even though they weren't expensive. I got her most of those books on business, advertising, and even one popular marketing book. The ads were everywhere. After about 2 years of dating, she got her lucky break. She was contacted to be a business consultant for a top company in our country, which turned things around for us. I worked as a marketer and tried my best to close big deals. Within the first 2 years of dating my ex-wife, I closed deals I could not close in 4 years, and although it wasn't a lot of money, it was a stepping stone for me. Shortly after that, things started to fall into place for us. I improved with marketing, persuading clients, and closing deals. She grew too. We married after dating for 3 years, and our lives continued improving. Before we married, we agreed to not have children until we reached a specific financial goal, and we didn't change the plan. We were driven by early success, and I believed that the same way famous successful men and women had done it, we could do it too. For the first 3 years of our marriage, we put in a ton of effort, had sleepless nights, brainstormed together, started a business, and even sacrificed many things to achieve our dreams. The only luxury we had was the food we ate, and the apartment we lived in. We owned one 2005 model car, and invested every money we made from our jobs in the business we were trying to grow. Luckily, we had the most significant break in the 4th year of our marriage. Sales skyrocketed, and even top organizations knew about us. In our 4th year of marriage, we decided to go on a vacation, the first after our small honeymoon vacation. I was so excited about it and happy, because my dreams had become a reality. We were able to move into a bigger and more comfortable apartment, and our business was doing well. We increased the number of our remote staff, and everything could be handled even in our absence. The money was rolling in steadily, and I was glad my ex-wife and I could finally live the life we had been dreaming of. I envisioned our vacation to be mind-blowing, full of intimacy and rekindling our love, but it opened my eyes to a very painful truth that I can't get over to date. While we were on vacation, my ex-wife was still connecting to her yoga classes online. It was just a part of her I had to deal with. She was committed and never missed a day, whether sick or not. On the 3rd day of our vacation, after we had gone out that morning, we returned to the apartment and rested. That afternoon, she said she was going for a walk and asked if I'd join her, but since I was still sleepy, I told her I would stay back and rest. Unfortunately, after she left, I couldn't sleep anymore and couldn't contact her because she didn't go out with her phone. I became bored and decided to play a game on her tablet. I didn't use my phone because I would wander off and spend the whole afternoon working or conversing with my staff. As soon as I started playing the game, a notification popped up, and it was from her yoga instructor. The last message he sent her read, "I love you," and had love emojis at the end, which I thought was odd. At first, I thought her yoga instructor was only being nice to her, but a part of me wanted to learn more. So I clicked on the message and it opened me to their main WhatsApp chat. What I saw afterward made my heart bleed. I found messages that dated back a year, and there were all forms of voice notes between them. They also exchanged their nudes, said dirty things to each other, and would occasionally make jokes about other members of their yoga class. I could not believe that my ex-wife was cheating on me with her yoga instructor, and she hid it effortlessly. Because we were also so busy on our phones, I never suspected anything fishy was going on. I'd even found out that they were always meeting at different hotels to get intimate, and each time they were together they made videos of them in bed or in the bathroom together. On that day, I realized that my ex-wife was not obsessed with yoga, but she was obsessed with her yoga instructor. She repeatedly told him she worshipped the ground he walked on and said things to him that she had never told me. According to her messages, he was her spiritual guide, and opened her eyes to the real truth. Reading all those weird things and seeing pictures and videos of them together destroyed a part of me. Even if I had been told by a psychic that my wife was cheating or would cheat on me, I would not have believed it. I trusted her with everything, and I wanted more than anything to spend the rest of my life with her. When I had seen enough, I forwarded all the messages, pictures, and videos to my phone and cleared every trace that I had touched her phone. I returned to bed before she returned, but she could tell I was sad about something. She pressed to know what it was, and I lied to her that I had lost a mega deal and felt terrible about it. I pretended to be sick 2 days later, and our vacation was cut short. When we returned, I knew she wouldn't miss her yoga class the next day, and she didn't. An hour after she left that morning, I surprised her at her class, and I asked if I could play her something on their general screen in her presence, and her yoga instructor agreed. Immediately, the first video started playing. Everyone gasped in surprise and turned to her and their yoga instructor. I watched my ex-wife stand there in confusion with tears in her eyes. She had tried to walk closer to me, but ended up running out of the hall in embarrassment. Her yoga instructor tried to hide his shame, but I played the recording too, and everyone saw their messages. It was such a big mess. When I got home, I realized that she had moved some of her things out of our room, and she left a small note which read, "I'm sorry," and that was the end of the road for us. We ended up divorcing and splitting every money we made from the business, and as for her yoga instructor, he was fired, and neither he nor my ex-wife dared show their faces at the facility again. I knew I could survive without her, but despite everything we had achieved together, I still hate her for doing what she did to me. She couldn't even face me to apologize or something. She just dropped a note. We haven't spoken to each other since then, and it's been 2 years now, and I've still been struggling to move on. It's terrible how good men always end up with unappreciative women. I'm so sorry this happened to you. It has happened, and it doesn't make sense for you to keep holding on to the past. Your ex-wife chose to cheat on you with her yoga instructor, and you shouldn't punish yourself for that. I understand she played a significant role in your life, but it's time to let go. I'm happy to hear that you didn't try to make things work, especially since she didn't show any form of remorse. You're stronger than you think. You just need to find your strength again. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Let me tell you about the time my world turned upside down. It all started on a Thursday evening, the kind of evening you'd expect nothing out of the ordinary. I was John, just an average guy, quiet and unassuming. But that night, I stumbled upon something that changed everything. I found my wife Linda's phone buzzing on the living room couch. Curiosity got the better of me, and what I saw was like a punch to the gut. A text from her coworker, Mark, that left little to the imagination. That's how I discovered Linda's infidelity. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who jumps to conclusions or makes a scene. No, I needed more than just a text to go on. So, I set up a hidden camera in our house. If you're thinking it's extreme, well, desperate times call for desperate measures. Over the next few weeks, I became something of a silent detective. The footage I collected was like a series of gut punches, each revealing more of Linda's ongoing affair with Mark. Every hug, every secret meeting, it was all there in high definition. But I wasn't going to just sit back. I had a plan. It started with an anonymous tip to Mark's wife. A little piece of information that led to a big explosion. She confronted him right at his workplace. Talk about drama. It was a public scandal that rippled back to Linda. Linda, my wife, was shaken up by the news. I could tell she was nervous, always on edge, probably suspecting that her affair was no longer a secret. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Meanwhile, I was making moves of my own. I moved half of our savings into a separate account, a financial safeguard you might call it. I was preparing for whatever came next. And what came next was a visit to a divorce lawyer. I needed to know where I stood legally. The lawyer was a straight shooter, told me exactly what my options were. I appreciated that. No sugarcoating, just the hard, cold facts. This was the beginning of the end. The start of a saga that would turn my quiet life into something you'd see in a movie. But let me tell you, living it was a whole different story. Linda was a wreck after that. She'd jump at every phone call, every knock on the door. It was clear she was scared of being exposed. But she still didn't know that I was the puppeteer pulling the strings. Meanwhile, I was setting up my financial fortress. Moving half of our savings was just the start. I reviewed every bank statement, every investment. I was leaving nothing to chance. If this ship was going down, I wasn't going down with it. The hidden camera continued to be my eyes and ears. Each day it captured more of Linda's deceit, more of her lies. It was painful to watch, sure, but it fueled my resolve. Every secret rendezvous, every whispered lie, it all added to the case I was building. Linda's panic was almost palpable now. She was on edge, constantly looking over her shoulder. The fear of exposure had her trapped in a prison of her own making. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Let's dive right back into the thick of things. After setting the stage for Linda's downfall, I knew I had to up my game. So I cooked up a story about a sudden business trip. It was a lie, of course, but a necessary one. Linda bought it, hook, line, and sinker, giving me the perfect opportunity to set my next plan into motion. While I was supposedly away, I hired a private investigator. If you think that sounds like something out of a noir film, you'd be right. But this was no movie, this was my life, and I needed all the evidence I could get. The PI was a pro, blending into the background, capturing every sordid detail of Linda's affair with Mark. Meanwhile, I wasn't just relying on hired help. I brought in some trusted allies, a few close friends who knew the real deal. They were on board with my plan, ready to lend a hand in any way they could. It was reassuring to have a small crew backing me up, making me feel a bit like the ringleader of a covert operation. Preparation for the confrontation with Linda was like rehearsing for the most intense performance of my life. I went over what I would say, how I'd say it, anticipating her reactions. It had to be perfect, a culmination of all the evidence and emotion churning inside me. The day of my surprise return came sooner than expected. I got back home quietly like a ghost. Linda was caught completely off guard, her face a mix of surprise and fear. I could tell she hadn't seen this coming. Without wasting a moment, I launched into the confrontation. It was intense, like a dam bursting. I laid out all the evidence before her. The texts, the videos, the testimonies. Linda tried to keep up her facade, denying everything with a frantic energy. But I was relentless, my words sharp and precise. When I finally showed her the video evidence, Linda's defenses crumbled. She saw the irrefutable proof of her infidelity, and the weight of her actions came crashing down on her. Her denial turned to desperation as the reality of what she had done, and what she was about to lose, hit her. That's where I'll leave you hanging for now. The story is far from over, but every tale needs its pauses, its moments of anticipation. And trust me, what comes next is worth the wait. As I watched Linda's world fall apart, a part of me wanted to relish in her downfall. But this wasn't a time for gloating. It was a time for action, for making sure that every piece of my plan fell perfectly into place. After the big confrontation with Linda, it was time to up the ante. I gave her an ultimatum. Come clean publicly about the affair or face the legal consequences. It was a hard line, but by then I was all out of sympathy. Linda's reaction? Panic, pure and simple. But I was past caring about her feelings. I had a mission, and I was going to see it through to the end. Without waiting for her to make a move, I went ahead and released the evidence of her affair to our social circle. Yeah, you heard that right. I made everything public. The texts, the videos, all of it. The reaction was immediate. Our friends, our family, they were all in shock. Some couldn't believe it. Others were angry, disappointed. It was a social earthquake and Linda was at the epicenter. But the fallout didn't end there. Remember Mark, Linda's partner in crime? His world came crashing down too. His affair was now public knowledge, and his employer didn't take kindly to the scandal. He got the boot, fired from his job. Karma, right? Amidst all this chaos, Linda was desperate. She came to me, begging for forgiveness, pleading for a second chance. But her tears and apologies fell on deaf ears. I was unmoved. My mind was made up. The divorce was happening, no turning back. So, I went ahead and filed for divorce, citing her infidelity as the reason. The legal process was set in motion, and there was no stopping it now. Papers were filed, lawyers were called in, the whole 9 yards. It was a whirlwind of legal jargon and meetings, but I was ready for it. This was the final stretch and I was determined to see it through. And that's where I'll leave you for now. The story's far from over. But every good tale needs its moments of suspense. Stay tuned because what comes next is the grand finale. By now, you know that my life had turned into something straight out of a soap opera. But trust me, this chapter gets even more intense. The divorce proceedings were in full swing, and it was time to talk about assets. Turns out, Linda's financial irresponsibility was about to catch up with her in a big way. During our marriage, I was always the one who kept an eye on our finances. Linda, well, she had a taste for the finer things in life, but apparently she wasn't too keen on keeping track of her spending. So, when the lawyers started digging into our finances, it was like opening Pandora's box. Linda's reckless spending was laid bare for all to see, and it seriously jeopardized her claim to our assets. But that was just the beginning. The social fallout from Linda's actions was like watching a house of cards collapse. Friends who once welcomed her with open arms now turned their backs. Our family, who had embraced her as one of their own, were now cold and distant. She was ostracized, left to deal with the consequences of her actions alone. And then there was the housing dilemma. Without her fair share of the assets, Linda couldn't afford to keep our house. She was scrambling to find a place to live, but with her reputation tarnished and her finances in shambles, it was an uphill battle. But wait, there's more. Linda's affair didn't just wreck her personal life. It spilled over into her professional life too. Word got out at her workplace about the whole sordid affair. And let's just say her employer wasn't too thrilled. Before she knew it, Linda was packing up her desk, her career at that company over. Through all of this, I remained focused on the end goal, the divorce settlement. And when it finally came, it was a win for me. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me a favorable settlement. It was a moment of vindication, a confirmation that justice had been served. So there you have it. The tale of a cheating wife, a quiet husband, and a dramatic fall from grace. Stay tuned for the final chapter, where all the loose ends get tied up. After the dust of the divorce had settled, it was time for a fresh start. I dove into my hobbies and interests, things I'd neglected for too long. It was like breathing new life into my lungs. I rediscovered passions I'd forgotten I had. It was exhilarating, liberating, and exactly what I needed. But life, as you've probably figured out by now, always has a way of throwing curveballs. Linda, carrying the weight of her actions, reached out. She wanted to reconcile, to make amends. But I was done with that chapter of my life. I firmly refused her attempts. The bridge was burned and there was no going back. Meanwhile, I was embracing new beginnings. I met someone incredible through one of my hobby groups. She was everything Linda wasn't: genuine, honest, kind. We clicked right away, and it wasn't long before we started dating. It felt good to be valued, to be seen for who I was, not for what I could provide. But the saga wasn't over yet. Mark, Linda's partner in the affair, was facing his own demons. Unable to cope with the fallout, he spiraled into a personal crisis. His career, his marriage, his reputation, it had all crumbled. It was a steep price to pay, and it seemed he wasn't equipped to handle it. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, Linda dropped a bombshell: she was pregnant. The catch? She wasn't sure who the father was. It was a mess, a real soap opera twist. And naturally, she turned to me, asking me to take a paternity test. Reluctantly, I agreed, but I made sure it was done legally, by the book. No room for doubt, no room for error. It was a strange feeling being potentially linked to Linda again, even in this small way. But I needed to know, to have that closure. The day the results came in was tense. The envelope held more than just a piece of paper. It held answers, finality. and when I opened it, I found relief I was not the father. For Linda, though, it was another layer of despair added to her already troubled life. And there you have it, the end of a saga that took me through the highest highs and the lowest lows. A story of betrayal and retribution, of falling down and getting back up. A story that, despite everything, ends on a note of hope and new beginnings. After the whole paternity test saga, I thought I'd seen the last of Linda's troubles. Turns out I was wrong. The news hit like a sledgehammer. Mark, the other man in this twisted tale, flat out refused to acknowledge the child. Linda was left high and dry, all alone in her predicament. It was a harsh blow even for someone who had made the choices she had. But Linda's woes didn't stop there. Her friends, the ones who used to flock around her, now kept their distance. Her family too was less than supportive. She was isolated, left to face the consequences of her actions and her pregnancy all by herself. Meanwhile, I was living my life focusing on my own path. I can't say I felt much about Linda's situation. It might sound cold, but after everything that had happened, my well of sympathy had run dry. I was indifferent, detached, just another bystander watching her world crumble. Linda's financial struggles were the icing on the without a job. With her reputation in tatters, and now a baby on the way, she was in a tight spot. Money was tight, and the lifestyle she was accustomed to was a distant memory. She was struggling, and it seemed like there was no light at the end of her tunnel. So there you have it, the latest in the saga of Linda's downfall. Stay tuned for more twists and turns. The news of Linda's financial struggle didn't surprise me. She had always had a taste for luxury, a penchant for spending without thinking. Now, with no steady income and a baby on the way, her financial situation was dire. She was scrambling to make ends meet, a far cry from the lavish lifestyle she once enjoyed. Amidst all this, I maintained my indifference. It wasn't my battle to fight anymore. I had my own life to live, my own future to build. Linda's choices had led her to this point, and it was up to her to navigate her way out of it. Her once glamorous life had unraveled thread by thread. The choices she made, the secrets she kept, had all come back to haunt her. She was facing the harsh reality of her actions, a reality that was unforgiving and relentless. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Linda, who once had everything, was now struggling to hold on to anything. Her fall from grace was a stark reminder of how quickly life can change, how swiftly fortunes can reverse. As I watched from a distance, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. The saga that had consumed my life for so long was finally coming to an end. Linda's story was her own to write now, and I had my own story to live. Her financial struggles were just another chapter in her tale of downfall. She was learning the hard lessons of life, lessons about responsibility, consequences, and survival. It was a tough road ahead for her, but it was a road she had to travel alone. You might think the storm's past, but hold on to your hats because there's still more to tell. Amidst all the chaos, I found something unexpected. A new community, a fresh start. In my new social circle, I found support, camaraderie, and genuine friendship. It was a diverse group of people, all with their own stories, but united in their willingness to welcome me into their fold. We shared hobbies, laughs, and the kind of conversations that stretched late into the night. It was a stark contrast to the loneliness of my past life. But while I was finding my footing in this new community, Linda's world continued to spiral. Her mental health, already fragile from the ordeal, began to deteriorate further. The isolation, the financial struggles, the weight of her choices, it was all taking a toll. Linda tried to claw her way back, seeking financial support to help with her situation. But she hit legal roadblock after legal roadblock. The system that she once thought would protect her now seemed to turn its back. Her attempts were met with frustration and dead ends. And then there was the chatter, the whispers and gossip that spread like wildfire through our community. Linda's story, her infidelity, and its fallout, had become a hot topic. Most sided with me, empathizing with my situation, casting judgment on her actions. It was a harsh reality for Linda, a public opinion court where she had already been tried and convicted. Throughout all this, I did find moments of self-reflection. While I was satisfied with how things had turned out legally, I couldn't ignore the emotional toll it had taken on me. It was a bittersweet feeling. Victory, yes, but not without its scars. So there you have it. the latest chapter in a story that's had more twists and turns than a mountain road. Stay tuned because there's still more to come. Here we are, at the final chapter of this whirlwind tale. Just when I thought I could close the book on Linda and all the drama, life threw a few more curveballs. Linda reached out to me again, her voice tinged with desperation. She was seeking help, any help, but I had made my decision. I had moved on and there was no going back. It was tough, but I remained firm in my decision to stay out of her life. I had my own path to walk and it no longer included her. Surprisingly, a few of Linda's friends, the ones who had turned their backs on her, began to show her some sympathy. But it was too little too late. The bridges were burned, and the distance between her and her former life was too great to bridge. During this time I came to a realization. Yes, I had won legally and morally, but the victory felt hollow. The whole saga had left a bitter taste in my mouth. Winning the battle hadn't brought the satisfaction I thought it would. It was a victory, sure, but at what cost? Linda's life took another dramatic turn when she went into labor. She delivered the baby alone in a hospital, a stark symbol of her isolation. It was a poignant moment, marking the beginning of her journey as a single mother, a journey fraught with challenges and uncertainties. As Linda navigated the early days of motherhood with minimal support, I was embarking on a new chapter myself. My relationship had grown serious, a sign that I was finally moving on from the past. This new relationship was healthy, built on trust and mutual respect. It was a stark contrast to what I had with Linda. As I reflect on the entire experience, it's hard to ignore the complexity of emotions it stirred. The journey was a roller coaster, filled with ups and downs, triumphs and defeats. It was a chapter of my life that taught me a lot about myself, about others, and about the unpredictable nature of life. Linda, in her new role as a single mother, faced an uphill battle. The challenges of raising a child alone, especially under such strained circumstances, were immense. Yet, in a way, it marked the start of a new journey for her as well. One where she had to confront the consequences of her actions, and hopefully find a path to redemption. For me, the end of this saga wasn't just about moving on. It was about growth, about learning from the past and building a better future. My new relationship was a testament to that growth, a sign that life could be beautiful again, that love and trust could be rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. The story of Linda and me, of her infidelity and its repercussions, was more than just a tale of a cheating wife and a quiet husband. It was a story of human frailty, of choices and consequences, of pain and healing. It was a story that echoed with lessons about trust, forgiveness, and the resilience